To conclude our chapter on privilege and oppression, let's look now at how the different theorists would examine and view white privilege and white supremacy. Each theory would focus on different key concepts and be supported by a different core set of assumptions. Remember that functionalists would say that groups serve certain purposes in society. Functionalism would consider hate groups and white supremacy as being dysfunctional for society. While these groups do serve a purpose for social misfits and the outcasts of society, they still don't contribute to the equilibrium or benefit of society as a whole. That's because these groups and this way of thinking is not functional for society. Functionalists would say that these groups' popularity would dissipate over time. Functionalists would also recognize that the dominant values of society are those such as capitalism, hard work, and patriotism, and that if people would just embrace those values, work hard, and be good citizens, then inequality would be reduced in our society. The base premise would be that everyone has opportunity in our society, and that privilege and unequal opportunity are not as pervasive as one might think. Conflict theorists would be concerned with the inequality and tension that's created when white supremacists engage in activities that demean and intimidate other groups. Conflict theory would focus on the disparity of resources between groups and the unequal opportunities that whites versus minorities have. Conflict theorists would focus on the lower educational, employment, housing, and healthcare opportunities because of discriminatory practices, and it would recognize that white privilege leads to large-scale discrimination. Conflict theorists state that non-white groups will continue to fight for social and political justice and equalities, as efforts made in the 1960s by civil rights groups may be dissipating and equal opportunity still has not occurred. Critical race theorists would consider how our social institutions, our educational, legal, and religious institutions, for example, are sustaining white supremacy and white privilege. It would look at how stereotypes and discriminatory laws perpetuate inequality and lack of opportunity. It would examine how our laws elevate the status of whites, and that these laws have to be closely examined with a critical lens to understand how to dismantle an inherently racist social order. It would also see how our social institutions shape our everyday experience and the meaning of that experience. Critical race theorists would also see how white supremacy uses racism as a tool to create more social discord, and that fueling racism is important for the white supremacist movement. And it would also see how the laws create a web of racism, that it's not just one law, one policy, or one belief system that creates inequality, but rather how all these different institutions and belief systems operate together to create a system of disadvantage. Finally, let's think about how important it is to study and understand political extremism and hate groups. Many of the people in power who have the ability to influence policy or contribute to elected officials have the ability to influence change. Some of these people are political extremists who wield unusual amounts of power. How an issue is framed may have a strong influence on who supports it. An example is immigration, and whether it is framed as an issue regarding losing American jobs or as an issue of people filling important jobs in society that others don't want to take, and whether we want to protect those people's basic human rights and needs. How the issue is framed is important as to where someone aligns regarding future policies. It's critical to understand extremism in order to reduce prejudice and white supremacy in our world. Now that we've considered the issue of white privilege and white supremacy, we're going to be looking in our next chapter at the issue of internalized oppression.